I never thought I would be that guy. The one who suspects his wife, the one who wonders if his perfect little life is a lie. But there I was, pacing in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space that had once been so comfortable. The house felt quieter now. Everything was the same on the surface, but I could sense the cracks. I had no real evidence, just a gut feeling, a quiet whisper in the back of my mind that something wasn't right. Rebecca and I had been married for 8 years. She was beautiful, successful, and everything I thought I wanted in a partner. We shared our lives in a comfortable rhythm, taking vacations, celebrating birthdays, and building our small world around our daughter, Lily. She was the light of our lives, the glue that held us together when things seemed too difficult to face. But over the past few months, something had shifted in Rebecca. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but it was like the spark had gone out of her. It started with the gym. I didn't think much of it at first when she began going more frequently, telling me she wanted to get in better shape. She'd always been health conscious, so a few extra sessions at the gym seemed normal. But then it became routine, and the small lies started to slip through. She would tell me she was going for a quick workout, but then I'd find her phone with her texts open, messages she hadn't bothered to delete. Hey, I can't stop thinking about last night. We have to do it again soon. The first time I saw the message, I told myself I was overthinking it. I was being paranoid. But the more I looked at it, the more I couldn't ignore the sick feeling that crawled under my skin. The timing didn't make sense either. She'd been telling me she was at the gym, but the text was sent from a hotel room. Hotel I hadn't even known she was near. Her routine had changed too. She'd leave earlier, come back later, and be distant when we did talk. I confronted her once, trying to remain calm, trying to hold on to the trust that had always been the foundation of our marriage. She laughed it off a little too easily and brushed it aside. It's nothing, really. Just a joke, a silly text. You're being ridiculous. I wanted to believe her. I tried to, but something inside me cracked. I knew the truth was buried beneath layers of deception, and the more I ignored it, the more it festered. I started checking her phone when she wasn't around, trying to piece together the fragments. What I found only confirmed my growing suspicion. There was someone else. I didn't know who he was at first. Her gym trainer, it turned out, was more than just a source of fitness advice. His name was Alex, and his texts with Rebecca became more frequent, more intimate. The moments between them were hidden behind words, but I could see the connection they shared, even if it was only through the glowing screen of her phone. The betrayal felt like a knife in my gut, sharp and unrelenting. And then I found a message that shattered me completely. Last night was incredible. Let's do it again tomorrow. I've already booked a hotel room. It was there, in black and white, the proof I had been seeking. The truth that had been gnawing at me for months. Rebecca had crossed a line, and I had been too blind to see it. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the fact that she had cheated, or the fact that I hadn't known her at all. The anger that bubbled up inside me wasn't the explosive kind. It was cold, calculating. There would be no wild confrontations or accusations. No tearful pleas for answers. I'd already made my decision, and there was nothing left to discuss. Rebecca thought she could betray me and get away with it, but she was wrong. I didn't tell her I knew. I didn't confront her that night or the next morning. I wasn't sure why. Maybe I wanted to make sure I had all the facts, or maybe I was waiting for the right moment to expose the lie. But I didn't feel angry, not in the way I expected. I felt something colder, quieter, like an old wound that had festered too long and now threatened to turn into something more dangerous. I spent the next few days observing Rebecca like I was a stranger, watching her every move, listening to her conversations. She was careful, too careful. She didn't look me in the eye the way she used to, and I could see the small, nervous gestures she made when we were in the same room. She knew something was wrong, but she didn't know how much I had already uncovered. Lily had a play date on Friday afternoon, so the house was empty, and the silence between us was deafening. I'd already set my plan in motion. I knew Rebecca was meeting Alex that evening. She'd mentioned it casually while we were having breakfast, something about squeezing in an extra session before dinner. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of a confrontation in our own home, so I made my preparations. While she was out, I took a small black notebook from the drawer in my office. It was filled with a plan I'd carefully crafted. Every detail had been considered. I had to act with precision, with control. There would be no outbursts, no messy emotions, just facts and consequences. I drove to the gym where Alex worked, a place I'd never set foot in before. It was sleek, modern, the kind of place that screamed money and status. I stood in the lobby for a moment, pretending to check my phone, but really I was taking in the atmosphere. Everything about the place felt wrong to me, like a piece of the puzzle that didn't belong. I approached the front desk and asked for Alex, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, he's in session," the receptionist said with a smile, clearly not recognizing me. "Do you want to leave a message?" I shook my head, my mind already racing. This wasn't about messages. I needed more. As I walked back to the parking lot, I felt a strange sense of detachment. The anger I'd felt before had been replaced by something else, something darker. It wasn't vengeance I was after, not exactly. It was justice, or at least what I believed to be justice. I couldn't let Rebecca walk away from this without facing the consequences. When I got home, I didn't say anything to Rebecca. She walked in about an hour later, her face flushed from the workout. She tried to kiss me on the cheek as if nothing had changed, but I stepped back just enough to keep her at a distance. Her smile faltered, just a little. It didn't escape my notice. "I want to pick up Lily," she said, her voice casual, but I could hear the tremor in it. I nodded, watching her head for the door. And in that moment, I knew I had to make my move. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not anymore. The following hours felt like a blur. I called a hotel where Rebecca and Alex had booked a room, the one mentioned in the message. The receptionist was polite, confirming the reservation under Alex's name. I didn't need to hear more. I already knew what was happening, and I didn't want to drag it out any further. It was time. When Rebecca came back with Lily, she looked for me. I had already set the stage. I called Lily into the living room to watch TV, letting her settle into the space while I waited for Rebecca to return. The moment she entered, I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I stood up and faced her, feeling that coldness in my chest again. There would be no drama, no yelling. This had nothing to do with anger. This was a decision, a choice. "I know about Alex," I said, my voice steady, low, not a hint of emotion. Rebecca froze, her face pale. For a second, I thought she might deny it, but then her shoulders sagged, as if the weight of her own guilt finally took hold. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. "I found the messages," I continued, watching her closely. "And the hotel reservation. It's all there. You thought I wouldn't find out, but I did." Her eyes welled with tears, but she didn't move. She didn't try to touch me, didn't offer any excuses. I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her voice breaking, but I could see the words were empty. The guilt was all she had left. I looked at her, this woman I had once trusted, the woman who had promised me forever, and I didn't feel the anger anymore. Not the way I expected. It wasn't an emotional outburst. It was cold, a business transaction of sorts. The truth had come out, and now there was nothing left to say. "I'm done, Rebecca," I said softly. "This marriage is over." I didn't wait for her to say anything else. I couldn't bear it. The lies, the deceit, everything we had built, everything I thought we had, unraveled in an instant. I turned away, my back to her, my mind already drifting away from the wreckage we had become. Rebecca didn't try to stop me. She stayed in the doorway, her hand hovering in the air like she was reaching for something she couldn't touch. She was silent now, probably too shocked to speak. But the silence was deafening. It was the silence of a marriage breaking apart, a future that had been erased with one simple declaration. Lily was still in the living room, watching her cartoon, unaware of the storm that had just passed through her family. The thought of how this would affect her twisted in my gut, but I couldn't let myself feel sorry for Rebecca. Not now. She'd made her choices, and those choices had consequences. Rebecca's tears were the only thing breaking the silence now, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. I'd already made my decision, and the weight of it was sinking in. This wasn't going to be a clean break. There was too much to untangle, too many emotions left to sort through. But I wasn't going to do it with Rebecca standing in front of me, pretending as if nothing had happened. "I've already contacted a lawyer," I said, the words coming out of my mouth with a finality I didn't expect. I wasn't giving her a chance to explain, to beg for forgiveness, or to promise that she would change. It was too late for that. The trust had been shattered, and once that trust was gone, there was no going back. Rebecca's face crumpled, her hands trembling as she reached for me one last time. "Please," she whispered. "Don't do this. Please, Ryan. We can fix this." I shook my head, my voice firm and steady. "No, we can't. You've already made your choice. You chose him over me, over our family. There's nothing left to fix." Lily wandered into the hallway at that moment, looking up at both of us with wide, confused eyes. She didn't know what was happening, didn't understand the weight of the words that had just been exchanged. But she could feel the shift in the air, the heaviness that settled in the room like a storm cloud. I knelt down to her level, forcing a smile. "Hey, kiddo. Everything's okay. Go back to watching your show, okay?" She hesitated, still sensing the tension, but nodded and turned back toward the living room. I watched her go, the guilt creeping in like an unwelcome shadow. This wasn't supposed to be her reality. She shouldn't have to deal with this. But Rebecca's actions had left me with no choice. I couldn't stay in a marriage built on lies just for the sake of keeping the peace. When Lily was out of earshot, I turned back to Rebecca, who was still standing in the doorway, tears staining her face. Her entire body seemed to collapse under the weight of her actions. "I never meant for this to happen, Ryan. You have to believe me. I made a mistake. A huge mistake, but it was just one night, one mistake." I didn't respond right away. There was nothing left to say to her. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry she got caught. I could see it in the way she spoke, the desperation in her voice. The guilt was real, but it wasn't enough. Not after everything she put me through. "You didn't just make one mistake, Rebecca," I said coldly. "You made a choice. Over and over again. You chose him. And now you're asking me to choose you again. But I'm not that person anymore. I can't be." Rebecca staggered back, as though my words had physically struck her. I didn't care. The pity I had once felt for her evaporated the moment I saw those texts, the moment I realized she had been living a double life. There was no way to undo the damage, no way to take back what had been broken. "I've already taken steps," I continued, the words flowing more easily now, as though I had been rehearsing them in my mind for months. "I'm filing for divorce, and I'm asking for full custody of Lily." Her eyes widened, the shock turning to panic. "You can't, Ryan, please. We can work this out. We'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever it takes. Please don't take her away from me." But I wasn't listening anymore. The woman standing in front of me was not the person I had loved for so long. That person had died the moment she chose someone else over us. Now all I could think about was protecting Lily, protecting the life we had left. I knew what this would mean for our family. It would tear us apart in ways I couldn't even begin to process. But I was willing to endure that pain if it meant Lily would have the chance to grow up in a stable, honest home. Rebecca's pleading grew louder, her voice breaking as she reached for me again. But I stepped back, holding up my hand in a silent demand for space. "No, this is over," I said more firmly now. "You've made your bed. Now you get to lie in it." She slumped against the doorframe, her sobs echoing in the empty hallway. But there was no sympathy left inside me. The woman I had trusted with everything was gone, and in her place was a stranger, someone who had no place in my life anymore. The next few days were a blur. I called my lawyer and began the process of filing for divorce. Rebecca moved into a small apartment nearby, but it was clear that this wasn't going to be a quick or easy transition. The tension between us was unbearable, and every conversation felt like a battle. I didn't want to engage with her more than I had to. She had broken my heart, and now I had to focus on what was best for Lily. The divorce proceedings began, and soon I found myself with paperwork, court dates, and legal jargon I never thought I'd have to face. But there was one thing that gave me some peace amidst the chaos, the thought of protecting Lily. I wasn't going to let her grow up in a house where betrayal was an option. She deserved better than that, and I would give her everything I had to make sure she had a stable, loving life away from the wreckage of Rebecca's decisions. The weeks after I filed for divorce felt like an endless march through fog. Each day was a blur of meetings with lawyers, negotiations, and paperwork. I had never imagined I would be here, but as the days passed, I grew more resolute. The house felt like a place I was merely passing through, and every corner held echoes of what had once been. Rebecca and I barely spoke. She moved into a small apartment on the other side of town, just far enough for both of us to avoid running into each other, but close enough that Lily could still see her. I didn't fight her on that, even though every part of me wanted to. Lily was young, but she had a right to know her mother. She deserved to have both parents, even if we could no longer be together. But Rebecca's presence, even in the form of her absence, weighed heavily on me. I saw her sometimes when I picked Lily up from her place. Rebecca would stand at the door, looking tired, her face drawn and haggard. She never asked to talk. She never tried to stop me. She simply watched as I took Lily, just as I had always done. One afternoon, after I picked up Lily from school, I received a call from my lawyer. Ryan, Claire's voice was tight, her usual calm demeanor replaced with a rare urgency. "We need to talk about something." "What's going on?" I asked, my chest tightening. "It's about the custody agreement. Rebecca's lawyer is contesting full custody. They're claiming that you've been emotionally distant, and they want to use your reaction to her infidelity against you in court." I stared at the phone in my hand, feeling a rush of anger and disbelief. What? She's actually doing this? After everything? "I'm afraid so," Claire replied, her voice steady but firm. "They're trying to paint you as the unreasonable one, the one who can't separate your anger from your role as a father. They'll use your actions during the divorce to claim that you're unfit for full custody." I could hardly process the words. It felt like a slap to the face. The audacity of Rebecca to turn this around, to manipulate the situation and make me out to be the villain, was almost too much to bear. "I've been nothing but patient," I muttered under my breath. "I've done everything for Lily. I'm the one who's been there for her, who's been holding it all together. And you'll need to keep doing that," Claire said, her tone softening but no less resolute. "I know this isn't easy, but we'll have to go into court with a clear head. Focus on Lily. Focus on the facts." The facts? It was always about the facts. But no matter how much I tried to focus on them, all I could see was the betrayal. Every day, I fought against the bitterness, the grief that wanted to swallow me whole. I wasn't just fighting Rebecca anymore. I was fighting for the life I had with Lily, for the stability that she deserved, no matter what her mother tried to do. That evening, I sat on the porch, staring at the empty driveway as I tried to sort through my thoughts. Lily was in bed, and the house was quiet, except for the muffled sounds of Rebecca's voice through the thin walls of the apartment across the street. I hadn't wanted to do this, to tear apart the family we had built, to take a wrecking ball to everything that had once felt safe and whole. But Rebecca had forced my hand. She had made it clear that she was willing to lie, manipulate, and betray me in every way she could, just to get what she wanted. And I realized, with a painful clarity, that there was no going back. The trust was gone. The love I had once felt for her was buried under the weight of her choices. I had to stay strong. For Lily. The days turned into weeks, and every day, the battle seemed to intensify. I would wake up and go through the motions, taking Lily to school, working, keeping my distance from Rebecca. But all I could think about was the court date that loomed ahead. The thought of having to sit across from Rebecca, facing the woman who had torn my world apart, filled me with a rage I could hardly contain. It wasn't until one particular evening that I began to realize just how deep Rebecca's betrayal went. I was cleaning up after dinner when my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Ryan, it's me, Rebecca." I stared at the screen for a long time, unsure of what to do. But the curiosity won out. "What do you want?" I typed back, my fingers tense as I hit send. Her reply came almost instantly. "I know this isn't going to make sense, but I need to talk to you. I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I know I've made mistakes. I was wrong to cheat on you. But please understand that it wasn't about you. It was about me and the mistakes I made. I want to make it right for Lily." I read the message again and again, the words seeming so empty to me now. Rebecca was asking for forgiveness, but her words weren't enough. They couldn't erase what she had done. But there was something else in the message. A small line, almost hidden beneath the surface of her apology. "I still love you, Ryan. I'll always love you." I almost threw the phone across the room. How dare she? How could she say those words after everything? The rage swelled up in me like a tidal wave, but I pushed it down. I couldn't afford to let her have that power over me anymore. Not now. Not when I was so close to finishing this, to giving Lily the life she deserved. I took a deep breath, my hand shaking as I typed my response. "We're done, Rebecca. You broke me. And now I'm done trying to fix what you destroyed. I hit send, and for a moment I stared at the screen, almost expecting her to reply. But she didn't. And I realized, with a strange sense of relief, that it didn't matter. The next day, I met with my lawyer again. The battle for custody was going to get ugly. I knew that. But I was ready for it. I wasn't fighting just for myself. I was fighting for Lily. I was fighting for a future where she wouldn't have to grow up surrounded by lies and betrayal. As we prepared for the court date, I felt the weight of everything beginning to shift. Rebecca had tried to break me, but instead, I was stronger than I had ever been. And this time, I wouldn't let her win. The days that followed felt like an endless cycle of meetings, legal paperwork, and cold silences. I focused on Lily, trying to keep her grounded amidst the chaos, but I could see the confusion in her eyes. She was too young to fully understand what was happening, but she could feel the tension in the air. Rebecca and I spoke less and less. She was distant, avoiding any real conversation, and I didn't push it. There was nothing left to say. Every time I saw her, I was reminded of the betrayal of the person she had become. I had to remind myself that this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Lily, about making sure she was taken care of, that she felt safe. Rebecca tried to reach out to me several times, but I ignored her. Her texts were full of apologies, of pleas for another chance, but they all felt hollow. I couldn't be that man who gave second chances to someone who had broken me so completely. Not after everything. The first court date was set, and I found myself sitting across from Rebecca in the courtroom. The lawyer I had hired was a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Claire, who had assured me that the case was strong. "You're in the right here," she'd said. "We have the evidence. She doesn't have a leg to stand on." But as I sat in that cold, sterile room, watching Rebecca sit with her attorney, the reality of it hit me. This wasn't just a divorce. It was the dismantling of everything I had once believed in. The future I had imagined with Rebecca was now a distant memory, something I could never have again. And yet, here I was, fighting for the life I had left, fighting for Lily. Rebecca's lawyer was a smooth talker, spinning their narrative of regret and redemption. He argued that this was a momentary lapse, that Rebecca had made a mistake she was deeply remorseful for. But I wasn't buying it. I'd seen the texts. I'd seen the hotel reservations. This wasn't a momentary lapse. It was a series of choices she had made, and now she had to face the consequences. As the hours dragged on, the tension in the courtroom grew. I stayed silent for the most part, letting Claire do the talking. But I couldn't help but glance over at Rebecca, her eyes filled with guilt and regret. She wasn't the same woman who had stood beside me at our wedding. The woman sitting there now was broken, shattered by her own actions. I focused on Lily. I thought about the life I wanted to give her, the stability I wanted to restore. The fight wasn't about Rebecca anymore. It was about protecting my daughter, making sure she had everything she needed, that she didn't have to carry the weight of this divorce with her into adulthood. When it was finally my turn to speak, I stood up slowly, my hands steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. "I don't want to do this," I began, my voice measured but firm. "But I have no choice. Rebecca's actions have torn our family apart, and I can't allow that to continue. I want full custody of Lily. I want to make sure she's raised in a home where trust, honesty, and love come first. I'm doing this for her." The words came out more easily than I expected, but they were the truth. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing. I knew what I had to do. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears as she looked at me. She didn't speak. She didn't try to deny it. She knew, deep down, that there was nothing left to salvage. She had destroyed everything, and now she was left with nothing but the consequences. The court session ended without much fanfare. There were no dramatic declarations, no emotional confrontations, just the cold reality of a marriage coming to an end. The judge set a date for the next hearing, and as I left the courtroom, I felt a strange sense of finality. The weight of the decision, of everything that had led me here, was sinking in. But there was no turning back now. The following weeks were a blur of legal paperwork and tense exchanges with Rebecca. We met a few times to discuss the details of the divorce, but there was no real conversation between us. She had become a stranger to me, someone I couldn't even recognize anymore. Lily was confused. She didn't understand why Mommy and Daddy weren't living together anymore, and the hardest part was explaining it to her. I didn't want to burden her with the details, but I also couldn't lie to her. So I kept it simple. Mommy and Daddy are just going to live in different places for a while, I explained gently one evening as we sat on the couch. But you'll still see Mommy. And we're both going to be here for you. She didn't fully understand, but she nodded, her little face scrunching up in that way that made me wish more than anything that I could undo everything that had happened, that I could make things better for her. The thought of her growing up in this broken world hurt more than anything. But I couldn't let my pain dictate her future. She needed stability, and that's what I was going to give her, no matter what. Rebecca continued to reach out, asking for meetings, for chances to talk. But I couldn't bring myself to see her. There was nothing left to say. She had chosen her path, and now she had to live with it. She had lost me. She had lost us. It wasn't until a month later, after the dust had settled and the divorce was in motion, that I heard from Rebecca again. This time, it wasn't a text or a phone call. It was a letter. She had written me a letter. I opened it cautiously, not knowing what to expect. As I read her words, I felt a pang of something. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was just the remnants of what we had once been. She apologized again and again for what she had done. She acknowledged the hurt she had caused, not just to me, but to Lily. She begged for forgiveness, though she knew she didn't deserve it. I'll always love you, she wrote. I don't expect you to take me back. I don't even deserve your forgiveness. But I want you to know that I regret everything. I regret losing you. I regret losing our family. I folded the letter slowly, staring at the words for a moment before tucking it away in a drawer. I didn't know how to feel about it. Part of me wanted to burn it, to never think about it again. But another part of me felt like this was her final attempt at redemption, something that, in some way, she needed for herself. But the truth was, I couldn't afford to hold on to the past anymore. I had Lily to think about. I had my own future to build. And so I moved forward, one day at a time, knowing that I had made the right choice, knowing that I was doing what was best for my daughter. And slowly, piece by piece, I began to rebuild. Life after the initial court hearings was a strange mix of relief and emptiness. It felt like I was in a limbo, neither fully present in my old life nor entirely stepping into the new one. There were days when the pain would catch me off guard, the familiar ache in my chest, the quiet moments when I would catch myself thinking of Rebecca, of what could have been. But those moments were fewer and further between. What I realized in time was that the loss I was grieving wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the death of the person I thought I knew, the person who had shared so much of my life. The truth was that I had been married to a stranger for far longer than I cared to admit. And that hurt more than the affair itself. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was emotional, mental, and perhaps, above all, it was the sense of losing my sense of self. But for Lily, I had to keep moving forward. She was the one constant in my life now. Watching her grow, seeing the spark of hope in her eyes, kept me grounded. Every time she reached out for a hug or whispered something sweet, it was as though she was pulling me out of the darkness, reminding me that I wasn't alone, that the love I had for her was enough to keep me going. Rebecca's letters continued, though I didn't respond. She would send them every few weeks, each one more desperate than the last. I'd read them, but I never acknowledged them. In some way, it felt like the final part of her apology, though I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear it anymore. Her regret, her brokenness, it wasn't mine to fix anymore. That had been her decision to make. But then came the day when I couldn't ignore it anymore. A letter arrived, just like the others, but this one was different. It was more formal, more official. I opened it, scanning the words, feeling a knot form in my stomach as I read through them. Rebecca was requesting joint custody of Lily. The letter was full of the same apologies, the same promises of change. But it was clear Rebecca wasn't giving up. She wanted back in, and she was using the legal system to do it. I couldn't say I was surprised. There had been no real apology, no true acknowledgement of the consequences of her actions. She was still the woman who had chosen Alex over her family, the woman who had betrayed me. And now she wanted to take Lily away from me, to tear apart the fragile sense of normalcy we were slowly rebuilding. My heart clenched as I thought of the implications. The last thing I wanted was to drag Lily into this toxic mess, but I couldn't let Rebecca manipulate the system. Not again. I knew what I had to do. I called Claire the next day. We need to prepare for a fight, I said, my voice tight with frustration. Rebecca is trying to take her back. Claire was calm, always composed as usual. You're not the first person to deal with this, Ryan. We'll put together a case. We'll show the court that your daughter's best interests are with you. It wasn't just about winning, it was about protecting Lily. And I would do whatever it took to make sure she was safe, that she didn't have to feel like her world was being torn apart every few months. The preparation for the next hearing was grueling. The emotional toll of reliving everything was exhausting, but there was no choice. Rebecca wasn't going to give up easily. The more I thought about her request, the more disgusted I became. She had forfeited her right to be a part of Lily's life when she chose to betray us both. The day of the hearing came faster than I expected. I spent the night before going over everything with Claire, making sure we had every detail in order. But despite my preparations, I couldn't shake the nervousness in my chest. The idea of facing Rebecca in a courtroom, knowing she was fighting for my daughter, felt like an impossibility. I couldn't believe I was here, fighting this battle. When we entered the courtroom, Rebecca was already sitting at the table, her lawyer beside her. She looked tired, worn down, like a woman who had been carrying a weight she couldn't shed. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. But then I remembered everything she had done, and that sympathy disappeared. She didn't deserve my pity. She didn't deserve anything. The judge called the hearing to order, and we all sat down. Rebecca's lawyer spoke first, laying out their argument. He painted a picture of a mother who had made a mistake, a mother who was deeply remorseful and ready to be a part of her daughter's life again. He emphasized her efforts to improve herself, to attend counseling, and to rebuild her relationship with Lily. I didn't speak at first. I couldn't. I knew my voice would shake with anger if I tried to say anything just yet. But then it was my turn. I stood up, my hands steady despite the storm inside me, and I began to speak. I didn't talk about Rebecca's infidelity, not in detail. I didn't need to. I spoke about what mattered most, Lily. I told the court about the stability I had created for her, about the life we had built together since Rebecca's departure. I'm not here to attack Rebecca, I said quietly, but with conviction. I'm here because I have to protect my daughter. I have to do what's best for her, and that means giving her a stable home, a home where trust is a cornerstone. I paused, taking a breath, letting the words sink in. Lily deserves better than a mother who lies. She deserves better than someone who would choose another man over her family. I'm asking the court to give me full custody of my daughter because I can't provide her with the stability and love she needs. I'm not perfect, but I'm the only parent she can count on right now. I could see Rebecca's face crumple as I spoke. She didn't speak. There was nothing left for her to say. When the hearing was over, the judge deliberated for what seemed like an eternity. But when he returned, his decision was clear. I was granted full custody of Lily. Rebecca was allowed visitation, but it was restricted. She would have to prove herself if she wanted to be a larger part of Lily's life. The moment the verdict was announced, I felt a sense of relief flood over me. It was over. The court battle was done, but the pain, the scars that had been left, would take much longer to heal. The weeks after the hearing were quiet. Rebecca took her limited visitation and, to my surprise, seemed to accept the boundaries that had been set. I never saw the same desperation in her eyes again. She had tried to manipulate the system, but she had failed. And though she was still a part of Lily's life, it was clear that she was no longer a threat. Not to us. Life began to feel normal again. I focused on Lily, on us. We started new routines, new traditions. The chaos that had once consumed me began to fade. It wasn't easy, but with each passing day, I found my footing again. I was no longer the man who had been betrayed, who had been broken by the one person he trusted most. I was a father, and that was all that mattered now. And slowly, but surely, I began to heal. The first few weeks after the court ruling were filled with strange peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that comes from resolution, but rather the kind that comes from survival. Rebecca's visits were a reminder of the life I once had, but the bitterness had faded, replaced by a grim sense of detachment. I had won the battle for custody, but the emotional war still raged inside me. Every time Lily came back from one of her visits, she seemed just a little quieter, a little more withdrawn. She was only 8, and she didn't have the words to explain it, but I could feel the unease in her. Rebecca's presence in her life, though limited, still cast a shadow. I did my best to make her feel safe, to reassure her that nothing would change, that everything would be okay. But I couldn't protect her from the fallout of what had happened. I couldn't shield her from the emotional weight of divorce, a betrayal. At night, when I tucked her into bed, I would kiss her forehead, telling her I loved her, and I would linger just a little longer than I had before. There was no more pretending. No more ignoring the fact that I was now her only parent, her only support. But I also realized that this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about her future, her sense of self. Rebecca had made a mistake, but Lily hadn't asked for any of this. And if I could do anything to make her childhood as stable and happy as possible, I would. I had spent so many years focusing on Rebecca, on our marriage, that I had forgotten how much of myself I had lost. After the divorce, I found myself grappling with the question of who I was without her. The silence in the house was deafening at times. The routines I had once shared with Rebecca felt empty now. I was no longer just her husband. I was a single father, navigating a world that felt unfamiliar and fragile. I tried to fill the void by throwing myself into work, but that only made the silence more oppressive. I took up hobbies I had neglected, long walks, reading books I had forgotten, and even taking a pottery class on weekends. Anything to fill the gaps, to distract myself from the fact that I was still grieving. One evening, I went through old photos of Rebecca and me, memories of happier times. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel anger. I just felt tired. It was over. There was no sense in clinging to the past, but it was hard to shake the feeling of betrayal that still lingered. And then, one evening, I met someone. It wasn't anything planned or deliberate, but the spark was undeniable. I met Julia at a local coffee shop. She was kind, warm, and easy to talk to. For the first time in a long while, I found myself laughing, letting my guard down. It didn't happen overnight, but Julia became a consistent presence in my life. She was patient, understanding, and she never once pressured me. She understood my situation and respected the boundaries I had set. I wasn't looking for another relationship, not really, but I welcomed her company. She reminded me of who I could be when I wasn't broken, when I wasn't defined by the mistakes of my past. And it felt good. As Julia became more present in my life, I was careful to keep her away from Lily for a while. I didn't want to introduce anyone too soon, especially not after what Lily had been through. Rebecca's visits were already confusing enough for her, and I didn't want to complicate things further. Julia understood. She never pushed me to bring Lily into the picture. But after a few months, I began to see that Lily needed more than just me. She needed someone to talk to, someone who could offer a different perspective. And as I watched her navigate her new reality, I realized that Julia's presence was starting to feel less like a distraction and more like a positive influence. One afternoon, I asked Lily if she wanted to meet Julia. We took it slow, with a trip to the park and a casual afternoon at the museum. There were no grand gestures, just small moments where they got to know each other. Julia didn't try to be a mother figure. She simply listened, encouraged, and supported Lily in ways I hadn't realized I needed. It was a slow process, but over time I saw the change in Lily. She began to smile more, laugh more. Her visits with Rebecca, while still strained, no longer seemed to weigh on her as heavily. Julia's presence had brought a sense of calm to our home, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was doing something right. One evening, as Julia and I sat on the porch, sipping wine and talking about everything and nothing, I found myself reflecting on the past year. It had been a whirlwind of emotions, of heartbreak and healing. But more than anything, it had been a journey of rediscovery. I had rediscovered my strength, my sense of purpose, and most importantly, I had rediscovered what it meant to live without the weight of betrayal hanging over me. I never thought I'd be here, I said, looking out at the stars. I never thought I'd have the strength to move on. But here I am. And I'm grateful. Julia smiled softly, her eyes warm. You've been through so much, but you're here. And that's all that matters. I looked at her, seeing the woman who had helped me find my way again. It wasn't love at first sight, but it was something deeper, something that had grown organically, without pressure, without the baggage of past relationships. It was real. And for the first time in a long while, I felt hope. The day I received the final decree for my divorce felt like a weight had been lifted, but also marked a new chapter in my life. I was no longer bound to a past that had hurt me, that had changed me in ways I couldn't undo. But more importantly, I was free. Free to love again. Free to live again. Rebecca's final attempt to be a part of Lily's life was met with resistance, but not from me. I no longer needed to fight her. I had let go of the anger, the resentment, the desire for revenge. My priority was always going to be Lily, her well-being, her happiness. And with Julia now in our lives, I felt like we had a new foundation, one that wasn't built on lies, but on trust, love, and respect. As the years passed, the memories of what had happened began to fade. I stopped looking back with bitterness, and instead, I began to focus on the future. Julia and I talked about marriage, about having a family, and about the life we wanted to build together. I never imagined I would find someone like her after everything that had happened, but life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch with Lily, watching her draw on the sidewalk with chalk, I realized just how far we had come. She was smiling, laughing, her world full of possibility. I couldn't change the past, but I could give her a future. Better one. And that, in the end, was all that mattered.